So welcome to our next lecture. I think this is lecture number 9 in Mesilat Yesharim. Let me silence my own phone. And we are about to do chapter 9, Perek Tes. And we are finishing the trait, the Mida of Zerizot, which we've been translating as alacrity, or what have I translated it something else?
Zeal.
Zeal was another one. So we're about to complete that trait. So that, as he did with Zihirut, which was the first trait that we discussed, Zihirut was caution or concern or carefulness, right? Carefulness to avoid things that are bad. Zerizut is the enthusiasm that one brings to doing things that are right, to doing the right thing. So he finishes it with the final chapter discussing what are the obstacles, the things that are detrimental to achieving the trait of zeal, of excitement for what we're doing. So, behold, mafside hazerizut, those things which take away, that are detrimental to acquiring zerizut, right? Heim magdile ha'atzla. Those are all of those things which increase laziness, right? The things which cause us to be lazy. So that's really the bottom line of everything, and he's going to go into it into a bit of detail. What is the biggest thing that makes us lazy? Is bakoshat hamenucha agufet, the desire for just rest, physical rest. People just don't want to work. V'sinat hatorach, and the people's hatred or aversion to having to take the trouble to do things right. V'avat haidunim, and love of the various pleasures. B'tashlum kol tzinaehem, in trying to experience the various pleasures of basically hanging around and not having to do the work, to do nothing. So this is the biggest thing that takes away from zeal and enthusiasm for doing the right thing, for living the right way. Ki hine adam kaze, a person that is like this, vadai, certainly shetichbar alav avoda, it will be a burden for him to do work, to work hard. Lifnei boro, before God, covid gadol. It'll be a tremendous burden. It'll be a very big, heavy weight on his shoulders to go about doing the work that's necessary to be done, if he's lazy and all he wants to do is hang around and enjoy himself. A person that all he can think of is he wants to be able to eat in complete relaxation and rest. And to be able to sleep without anything bothering you, without any stresses. And he doesn't want to go or walk unless he's walking in a leisurely, calm, slow manner. A person that's similar to these kinds of, that's all he's looking for, that's all he wants in life, is to just chill, right? It's going to be tough for him to get up and go to shul and pray in the morning, right? Or if he's sitting around and eating a nice meal, he's not going to stop to go to shul and daven mincha, right? Or to do the things he's required to do. To go out to do any important good act, right? Unless the time is so clear, like he has nothing else to do and there's no obstacles in his way whatsoever, then maybe he'll go and do something good. But if there's any bother, if God forbid you have to cut off something that you're enjoying, he's never going to do it, right? Certainly, such a guy who hardly ever is going to do anything right, he'll certainly find it hard to hurry and do something with the kind of zeal that we've been discussing when we discussed the excitement of Talmud Torah, or to go study Torah, right? It's a pain in the neck to have to come out on a Tuesday night and learn Torah, right? You'd rather be sitting at home, watching a movie or doing nothing, which is fine in its time, but when you have the opportunity to do something, it takes effort and energy to get up and do it. And once a person becomes accustomed to being lazy, accustomed to not doing things, then he doesn't even have enough self-control to overcome that when he wants to. So there may even be events, there may even be things that we actually want to do and engage in. This is true about so many aspects of life. Obviously, Mesilat Yesharim here, Ramchal is talking about our spiritual life and our relationship with God, but it has to do with all of our lives. There's so many things that we know we would love to do, but we've become so accustomed to making excuses and being lazy and not doing anything that even when we want to do something, even when an event is happening out there that we feel like we should be involved, we find plenty of reasons not to, because we get involved in that habit. Because this person, his will, his desire, which is ultimately to do the right thing, has become entrapped and become imprisoned, right? The ma'asar ha'hergel, in this prison of doing things habitually, anasa teva sheni, which becomes his second nature, to just act in such a way, or to not act. Second nature is to hang out and do nothing and be lazy. The omnam, however, a person needs to know, right? And this is, I find myself telling myself this often, and occasionally when people ask me advice, if in the appropriate context, that we're not here to chill, right? It's just not the way the world works. We find us telling this to our children, whether they're young or old, right? You want it to be easy, but that's just not the way the world works. It's not easy. It's just not. You might want it to be that way, but it's not, right? The fact is that in order to be successful, in order to accomplish anything in this world, it takes a lot of pain and it takes a lot of effort. That's just the way it is. And what the Ramchal is telling us here is we need to accept that. To get beyond it, we need to accept that it wasn't meant to be easy, right? That's not how it works. And if we accept that, then we can move to the next step. Okay, let me get myself off this couch to do something, right? But right? Rather, a person should conduct yourself like a worker who eats a maskireim, who is working for someone who's paying them. And you're standing in front of the guy who hired you and he's paying you X number of dollars to do a job. You're not going to sit around and scroll on Instagram, right? You're going to do your job because you're hired to do a job. You have to do the job, so it's the same thing. Us in this world, we're here to do a job, right? Just like it says, Chazal, the rabbis teach us, Agire de Yomanan. That's Aramaic for we are day laborers. We're hired day laborers. We don't have the option to sit around and do nothing, right? In order to get anywhere in this world, we got to work. And he compares this to similarly to those who are going out to war, soldiers going out to battle, right? If we were in the middle of a war and we went to visit our army to see how wonderful our soldiers are protecting us, and we saw them hanging around doing nothing and playing video games, we'd probably be a little concerned, right? So b'mar choseim, when they're out on their battles, they eat quickly. They're not sitting around having grand meals, right? They have quick naps and sleep. They're not sleeping 14 hours a day. And they're constantly alert and aware and ready to fight when it happens. This is a famous verse from Eo, from the book of Job. A person was born to toil. A person was born to work. And when you accustom yourself to working this way, to working as if you're a hired worker, working as if you're a soldier that has to constantly be on guard, then when you have that attitude, then the work will become easier for you. It will certainly become easier for you. So it's having that psychological mindset, recognizing that this is what we're here for. We're here to work. We're not here it's not meant to be easy. That's what that will make the work easier. Because you'll always be prepared. You'll be prepared, you'll be ready. And when you're prepared and you're ready to do the job, then you do a much better job, and the job is much easier to do. And in the same manner, this is the teaching of the rabbis. May memory be blessed. This is the way of the Torah. Paspa melach tochal, eat your bread with some salt, umayim b'masura tishta, and drink water in small amounts, ve'al aretz tishan, and sleep on the ground. So what are they telling us? They're not telling you that we have to torture ourselves. They're telling you, don't get stuck in all the pleasures and laziness. Right? You have to shun the comforts and pleasures as the ideal, right? They're not the tachlis, they're not the purpose. He's not saying you can't have them, but the purpose is not to enjoy ourselves. The purpose is to do our work. So that's the key thing. That's one of the things that makes us lazy. So in other words, he said, what takes us away from achieving this trait of zirizut, right? Of zeal, right? Number one, anything that makes you lazy. The first thing that makes you lazy is this mindset, thinking that you're here to sit around and enjoy yourself, but not realizing that we're actually here to work. We're here to do a job. So what else makes us lazy? Od mimafsidi hazri is just another thing that is detrimental and takes away from our ability to achieve this trait of zeal. Hurov hapachad. This will be very interesting balance, which he's about to discuss here, something which we all struggle with. It is the tremendous amount of fear, v'godol hamora min hazman v'toldosav, is the fear of things that will happen over time. Constantly worried about the future, constantly worried about, what's going to happen tomorrow, right? If I take this path, right, what's going to be, right? And it becomes, it disables you from progressing today, right? Constantly being nervous about, oh no, tomorrow the shoe's going to drop, right? Tomorrow everything's going to go bad, right? You might be afraid it's going to be a freezing cold, a cold front's going to come tomorrow and there's going to be an ice storm, or there's going to be a heat wave tomorrow and it's going to be too hot. Or you're worried that there's going to be some kind of a bomb or a mass shooting, or there's going to be an illness or a big plague is going to happen, or a pandemic, right? You're worried there's going to be a tornado, a wind. Any fear that we have about what's going to be tomorrow, I can't do anything because tomorrow is going to be this terrible disaster. And in our own lives, I mean, he picked, obvious big examples, but we all think tomorrow, I'm going to lose my job. Tomorrow, my investment's going to go kaput. Tomorrow, we all can look in our own lives and think of a million things that we're worried is going to go wrong tomorrow, right? And it disables us. It disables us from having enthusiasm to do what we need to do today, right? And it stops us from accomplishing and achieving today. We're constantly worried about what's going to be. This is what Shlomo, Solomon said in Mishlei in the book of Proverbs. Omar Atzel, the lazy person, says, right? Shachal baderech, right? There's going to be a lion in the road, right? Ari ben Archovos, there's going to be a lion hiding in the road. I'm not going to go tomorrow to work because I heard someone said that there's going to be a lion hiding behind a thing and I'm going to get eaten by a lion, so I'm not going to go, right? So, the point is not, obviously the lion is a mashal. It's a proverb, right? We all worry, I'm not going to go to that interview because they're not going to like me. They only like these people. They don't like those people. A friend of mine told me they're never going to talk to a guy like you because of this and that. And then you miss the opportunity to do something, and it may have worked, just because somebody told you that they won't hire you because they don't like people from whatever, but you still have to take the opportunity and go and do it and try your best, right? Our rabbis, may their memory be blessed, they've criticized and this trait, this characteristic, and they said that if the people that do this are the people that are sinners, people that that don't accomplish and achieve what they should. Umikra Messiah, and those are the people that are constantly afraid and they don't do anything, they don't accomplish, they don't achieve because they're constantly afraid of risk, right? Umikra Messiah, and there's a verse out there which supports them. They'll say Pachadu B'Tzion, right? They were the Chatoim, right? The sinners in Zion were afraid. Those who are chanefim, a chanef is also a sinner, but it literally means a flatterer, a person who tries to get his way by by flattering others, but not by actually achieving anything. That's what a chanaf is. But either way, they're always worried about fear. They're always afraid of what's going to be tomorrow, so they don't do things today. To the point until one of the great rabbis said to his student when he saw that he was afraid, you must be a sinner, right? Because why are you so afraid? You're sitting here doing nothing because you're so afraid. You're afraid of, how many times have we talked to people that we thought, and this is true about ourselves, but we see it in others faster than we see it in ourselves. When someone has a great idea, right? And you really think that they have the skills and ability to maybe accomplish something that could be really great and really make a difference. And then you tell them, I think that's a wonderful idea. I'll support you. Let's do this. Let's make this happen. And then the person says, but I'm afraid because I heard that guy, he's mean, and the other guy, he's going to yell tomorrow. He yelled at me last year. He's going to yell at me tomorrow. No, he's not going to donate any money to support the project because he's mad at my uncle, and all kinds of reasons. And then they don't do it. And who knows? They don't even try, right? Because of all the things they were afraid of. And who knows what they could have achieved if they tried. Maybe all of his fears were for naught. Maybe some of them would have been true, but he would have figured another way around it. But how many times do we do this ourselves, where we know of something that we want to accomplish or achieve, but we sit back because of what we're afraid might happen. Klalo shel davar. The general rule is as follows, right? We have to remember that we're here temporarily, right? The kavua ba'avoda, right? And we need to remember that our job, our work is constant, right? That's not temporary. That's something that we have to do. Right? We should be satisfied and happy with all of the things that we do have in this world. With that which, if by chance we happen to have a nice meal, go ahead, enjoy it. Enjoy the opportunities that you have. But remember, but you have to take those things that you have, those resources that you do have, those skills, abilities, resources, right? But stay away from just rest and chilling out and doing nothing. But you should always be close to working, to doing. The famous saying people always say, if you want to get something done, ask a busy man, right? Don't ask the guy that has nothing to do to get it done, because he's not going to get it done, right? You want to find the guy who's running around doing a million things. He's the one who's going to get it done, right? Right? So, and that's the point. Right? And you should always be batuach, have faith in God. He told us and don't be so afraid of the things that just happen over time and all the accidents that could happen. If you're afraid of all those accidents, you'll never achieve anything. And it's very interesting because it really tells us a lot about how Ramchal understands what bitachon means, right? Bitachon is translated usually as trust in God or faith in God, right? But Ramchal doesn't never say here that you should do it because these accidents won't happen, right? Maybe it will be cold tomorrow, right? Maybe there will be a lion in the street, right? But if nobody ever went out in the street because they're always afraid there's going to be a lion in the street, then no one's ever going to accomplish anything, right? So you have to take risks. You have to be willing to act in the now and not constantly be worried about what's going to happen and what might go wrong, because otherwise you won't achieve anything. So bitachon doesn't mean, having faith means realizing that I need to live in the now. I need to live in the moment. At this moment, I have to achieve, I have to accomplish, I have to work, right? Because that's what I'm here for. I have a job to do. God hired me to do this job, and I got to do this job. So then, well, what's the obvious retort, right? What would somebody say? What do you mean? You're not allowed to put yourself in danger. But if there's a lion in the street, right? Right? Then you're going to go get attacked by a lion. How could I tell you you're supposed to go and into the street when there's lions? I mean, Shema Tomar, you might complain and argue with me and say, our rabbis, the sages, have warned us all the time. You need to be careful. You can't take needless risks, right? If you're supposed to wear a seatbelt because God forbid you're in an accident, you need to take reasonable measures to stay safe. And I'm telling you, there might be a lion in the street. Don't go, right? Right? There might be an ice storm. Don't drive, right? So afilu hu tzadiku b'masim. So you should never put yourself into a situation of danger, even if you're a great tzaddik and you think God would never punish me. I'm perfect, right? But still, you need to be careful. You can't put yourself in a state of danger. V'yamru, and they also said, Chazal also taught us, Hakol bidei shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven. Chutz mitzinim upachim, except for atzinim means the cold. Pachim is usually translated as fevers or illnesses. The bottom line being, right, that yes, God controls everything. But tzinim pachim, the cold, you don't go out in the cold and not wear a coat and say, God will keep me warm, right? You put a coat on, right? You don't go out in the middle of a pandemic and breathe in people's faces, right? And then say, oh, God will protect me, right? You take reasonable measures to protect yourself, right? So when Mikra in the verse, the pasuk says, "V'nishmartem ma'od l'nafshosechem," you should be very careful to take care of your health. Harei she'ein lahachlit habitachon hazeh al kol panim, right? So you see that you should not have such bitachon. You should not have such faith and trust in God that everything's going to be fine. Even if you're going to do something good, right? If I told you there's a great mitzvah to do on the other side of this raging river, is this rickety bridge, that they inspected 10 years ago, it might not be the best idea, no matter how big the mitzvah is, to walk on the bridge over the rushing river, right? Because, and if you do, you're taking your life into your own hands. So how could I tell you not to be afraid of tomorrow? So in other words, how do you differentiate between what's a real fear, what's a legitimate fear that I shouldn't even do good things for, and what's not? So he's going to give us the trick for how to know the difference. Okay, so that you should know. So how do I answer this contradiction, this obvious contradiction, right? We all remember during the pandemic having these arguments, right? And there's certainly room for different interpretations, right? But within reason, right, there should be some general rule that you could say, okay, certain risks you could take, certain risks you shouldn't take, right? Certain precautions you should take, certain precautions might be unreasonable. I'm not here to debate which ones they are or aren't, right? But I think we can all agree that there's lines to be drawn somewhere, right? And so how do you differentiate? Yesh yira v'yesh yira. There's such a thing as fear, and there's such a thing as fear, right? Yesh yira ru'uya, there's an appropriate fear. V'yesh yira shota, and there's a foolish fear, right? There's two types of fear. When being afraid about what's going to happen tomorrow, there's two types, right? There's foolish ones and real, sensible, reasonable ones. Yesh bitachon v'yesh holelos. And this flip side, there's such a thing as having faith and confidence, right, in your relationship with God. And there's also such a thing as being a fool or an idiot and having foolish confidence, right? Saying, God will protect me in doing something ridiculously dangerous, right? Or so how does this work? How do we differentiate? God gave us a brain, right? He made us intelligent, right? We can use our mind and think through these things. There's way we can figure this out. It's not rocket science. Or even if it is rocket science, we have brains capable of understanding rocket science, right? Right? We have a seichel nachon, we have a proper head, usvara, we can use reason, nechocha, with which we can determine l'sheyinag atzma al derech tov, how to go on a proper good path, v'yishomer min advarim hamazikim, and be careful from things that are actually dangerous, asher nivru la'anoshas risham, which were created in order to punish the rishaim, the evil ones. Now, interestingly, you can read the sentence in different ways, but if you read it really carefully, you'll see that here a rasha and a chote, right, a sinner and an evil person, he's referring to someone who doesn't think, right, about what's dangerous, right? That he's referring to a chote, right? He said before, is a person who's overly afraid, right? And sits and is lazy because he's afraid of things that are unreasonable to be afraid of. So he doesn't do or accomplish anything. And a rasha is a person who takes risks upon himself that he shouldn't, does dangerous things that he shouldn't be doing, right? So we can use our mind, we can use our head, right? Use seichel, use your head to differentiate between those things, which you can go on the right path, do the right thing, but be careful. So say you're going to a job interview, right? And somebody says, that guy, he doesn't like, he likes it when people are neat and straight. So you go, you wear a suit and a tie, and you brush your hair, and you look like a mensch. You don't go in, with a t-shirt and jeans and smelling like you just, whatever, went swimming and whatever. So you take basic normal precautions that make sense, that are reasonable based on the knowledge that you have. But then if there's a person who goes and takes risks that are unnecessary, he has faith in places where faith is inappropriate. He goes and does things, right, and says, I have faith that God's going to save me, right? But that's not faith. That's foolishness. That's silliness, right? He's saying, examples from the pandemic, taking risks that put yourself and your life at risk, right? And claiming that God's going to protect you. That's silliness. That's crazy. That's wrong. So you need to, it's good that I have the pandemic only a few years in our memory. We pretend to not want to talk about it, but it does remind us of these kinds of risks, right? I think it's an appropriate example. Such a person is a sinner, right? Because what he's doing is against the will of God. God wants us to be careful. He wants us to protect ourselves. You think you're doing what God wants, while you're not doing what God wants. You're doing the opposite of what God wants. Not only are you putting yourself in danger, the specific danger of that specific situation, right? In my example, putting yourself in danger of getting an illness, right? A danger which you're really putting yourself, you're exposing yourself to because you're not taking proper precautions. You're doing even worse, because the action that you're doing that you think is a good deed, right, is against what God wants. It's a sin in and of itself, right? You think you're doing this great good deed, but the sin that you're doing, so not only are you not taking the precautions and putting yourself at an obvious risk, that thing which you think you're doing that's such a great deed that's going to make God protect you is itself a sin, right? So, however, he still didn't answer to us how to tell the difference, but we're going to get there, I promise. Right? V'ulam hashmira hazos, right? However, this type of precaution, right? V'zos hayira, and the fear hamiyusedes al hanogas achochma b'haseichel, right? Which is founded upon chochma, wisdom, and seichel, and common sense, right? I'm translating seichel as common sense, but I guess reason is probably better, right? Common sense isn't always sensible, but on real chochma and wisdom, in other words, you follow the science, right? You follow the reason, you follow the facts, right? And you take precautions that make sense, that are reasonable. That type of guarding, that type of shmira, that's what's appropriate. Use your head, right? Don't follow whatever the social media feed is yelling at you to follow. Don't follow where your heart wants to go because you're lazy, or your heart wants to go because you want to be a part of a certain group, or your heart wants to go because of God knows whatever reason it might be that's convincing you to do that in your friend group. But do it because it makes sense, because it's logical, because it's reasonable, and it's based on facts. Regarding this is what the Tanakh, what the Navi says when he says in Mishlei and Proverbs, Orum ra'ara, a smart person can see and foresee evil. He can see what negative outcomes might happen from my actions. V'nistar u'pesayim abru v'nenashu, right? But people that are, I'm sorry, ra v'nistar u'pesayim, but fools, abru, they go do things anyway, and nashu, and they end up getting punished. They end up stumbling because they're fools. So that's appropriate fear. That's fear that's reasonable, that makes sense. So you look, you see what's a reasonable thing that I should be afraid of, and what reasonable precautions I could take to keep myself away from those dangers, right? Achayira hashota, the other kind of fear, the foolish fear, that's when a person tries to move one precaution after another precaution after another precaution, and another fear on top of another fear. And we've all seen such people, right? And you keep on making, you put up an alarm, and for the alarm you make an alarm, and for the alarm's alarm you make an alarm, and then for the wall you make a wall, and then for the wall's wall you make a wall, and so on and so forth. Those are metaphors, but we certainly have seen people that have done this, and many of us may have been guilty ourselves, right? In such a way that in the end you eliminate and you're mivatel, you ruin your ability to grow in Torah and in the work and in the job that we have in this world. But he's going to tell us in a minute, right? So what's the general rule? What's the bottom line? How do you know the difference? If you're worried, right? If you're seriously, most of the time it's pretty obvious, right? What your motivations really are. Is it laziness, or is it truly afraid of a rational fear, right? But it's not always. Sometimes we're not quite sure. You hear this guy tells you this, the other guy tells you that. Is it reasonable? Is it not reasonable? I don't know. How do you know the difference? So he's going to give us the trick. How do you tell the difference between those two different types of fear? It's the difference that the rabbis taught us when they told us the following thing, the following rule. And here's a phrase in Aramaic, which appears in Shas many times. It appears many times. If the damage, the potential damage is common, it's different, right? In other words, what's the real risk of it happening? If it's a common risk, he's not giving us a percentage point, right? But you can generally know, right? Is the risk real? Is it common? Like if I told you don't go to work tomorrow in Birmingham, Alabama, because there might be an earthquake, right? Well, there might be an earthquake, but when was the last time there was an earthquake? Do we live on a fault? I don't think so, right? Maybe, if someone can correct me. So the chances of there being an earthquake, but if I told you, let's have a picnic tomorrow, and the weather report says that at 3 p.m. there's going to be big thunderstorms with a level 5 tornado risk, then you're kind of dumb, right? Right? That's shchia chazeka. That is not the time to be having a picnic, right? So you have to use your brain, right? That's the bottom line. Is it frequent? Is it common, right? What are the risks that you're taking? I see your hand up, Yosef. I'm just in the middle of a thought. I'll give you a chance.
Yeah, just about that. Rav Avidan, who was the chief rabbi of Tzahal for a little while, suggested 5%. He drove me to Minyan every morning for about 2 months, and he said, "Am I allowed to speed?" And he basically said, "If there's a risk of an accident, on our way, then if it's 5 to 6%, then we're not allowed to." So that was his definition.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable number. I think that's a reasonable number. It's a real chance that something bad could happen. Then you don't take that risk, right? But I'm sorry, so there's two factors that he's about to say. A place where the damage is matzoi, meaning it's common, so that might be the 5% rule, right? Or whatever rule you want to hold by, but that's good enough, right? Vinoda, and it's known, right? In other words, we know there's a risk of going in that place because everyone knows that there's a pride of lions in that place that just really likes the taste of human, right? So it's probably not the best idea because you know that it's there. But when you imagine up risks that aren't even known, right? Or there are risks that are known, but they're extremely rare and unusual, right? Right? Then you don't need to be careful. But if it's known and it's common, then yesh li shomer. Then you should take whatever precautions you need to avoid that risk. Ach makom she'ena hezek noda, but if there's no known risk, right? Don't start making things up. Don't just think, well, maybe there's going to be, some pandemic, something's going to happen tomorrow. Maybe a new disease is going to fall from heaven and so I shouldn't go. Maybe, I don't know, maybe, but that shouldn't be the reason why you don't go, right? So al kayotzi bazen nemar, and similar areas to this, we also say the following thing. Reyes ad lo chazinan lo machzakinan. This is actually, it's a halachic phrase, which they're using now. And this isn't really a halachic book. It's not a book of law, but a reisa is a a negative attribute, something like, something that you don't see, like a flaw, as Araya says, a flaw, right? So a flaw that we don't see, we don't assume that it's there, right? Right. So it's like I said, it's a halachic principle, right? But here he's using it in a moral sense, right? If you have no idea if there's such a thing, then you don't worry about it, right? And another saying that has a similar idea: a wise man only has what his eyes can see. You can only make judgments based on all the facts that are before you. Don't start worrying about facts that aren't there. There might be, he's not denying that there could be facts that you don't know. But if you lived your life that way, you'd never get anywhere. That's the kind of thing which is really stemming from laziness as opposed to true fear. Hu atzmo inyan haposok she'evenu lamala. This itself is what the verse which we brought before is talking about, where we said orum ra'a v'nistar, right? A wise person, a crafty person, right? He can see the evil that's coming down. He can see the accident that could happen, and he hides away from it, right? A wise person knows that in this area, if you're walking in an African safari and you're going on a path by yourself without there could be a lion, and it's probably not the best idea to be wandering around, right? But that's talking about someone who hides from danger that he can see, that he knows, that he's aware of. But we're not talking about someone who's not smart if he's imagining something that could be that might happen, that's possible, that it might come, right? That is crazy, right? So the bottom line is those two things. Is it common, right? Is it something that really happens or really could happen? And noda, is it something that we know about, we can identify? So that's how you differentiate between those two fears. So that fear could be a source of laziness. It could be a source of excuses to not achieve and accomplish, but obviously reasonable precautions every person should take. And this is clearly totally what the verse was, the other verse that I quoted before from Mishlei, from Proverbs. Omar Otzel, a lazy man says, Shachal baderech, there is a lion in the road. Ari bein harachovot, there's a lion in the streets. Now, I don't know this for sure, but rechovot usually is not referring to rechovot is referring to streets in the city, right? It's not referring to a derech, which is a path that leads from one town to another. And I imagine that in those days, that to be afraid of a lion on an intercity road is not completely crazy. But Ari bein harachovot, that it should be in the city, in the streets, was probably an unusual occurrence that you really didn't need to be worried about. And the sages, may their memory be blessed, Pershuha inyan kimin chomer. They interpreted this passage in a beautiful way. Al-Harot, to show us ad hechon magat iras hahevel, how far this fear of nonsense can go. La'afrish adam in amaseh atov, which this fear of nonsense that can keep people away from doing a good thing. And again, I think if we think back to the amount of times we had good ideas, like really good ideas, and things that, programs we wanted to start, whatever, anything or things, whether they were in our own lives or in communal life, right, that we didn't do because we were afraid. What are people going to think? What are people going to say? But we got millions of things. This one's not going to like it. That one's not going to like it. They're going to get into a fight. So on and so forth, right? So, but because we're afraid of nonsense. So Amru, they said, Shima Dvarim Amar Shlomo Ba'atzal. Shlomo said 7 things. Solomon said 7 things regarding a lazy person. Ketzad, how is this? Amru La'atzal, they said to a lazy person, Hare Rabcha Bo'ir, your teacher, your Rebbe, your rabbi is in the city. Lecho L'mad Torah Mimenu. Go and listen to his lecture. He's giving a lecture tonight. Go, right? Go learn something. Go do something important. Also, many answers them. I'm worried because there's a lion on the road. I'm going to go to him and I'm going to get attacked by a lion. So I'd rather stay home and be safe. Okay. Rabcha b'socha Medina. Well, he's not in the city, but he's in the neighborhood, right? Is in this area. I'm worried. Well, maybe in the streets there might be a lion. He's in your house, right? He's in your building, right? He's upstairs, right? If I go, the door's going to be locked. I won't be able to get in. I don't have the right admission card, right? You know, you can look over there in this medrash where it goes through the same thing. And the bottom line is that no matter how close he is, you'll always find an excuse, something to be afraid of. No matter how a lazy person will find some reason why he can't go, right? So the bottom line of it all is the lesson. It's not really fear that's causing him to be lazy. It's his laziness that causes him to make up excuses of fear, right? Right. It's really the bottom line is he's just not interested in going, and he'd rather just stay home and do nothing. And then he makes up all of these smoke screens, these supposed risks in order to give a good excuse for not doing it, or what he's trying to pretend is a good excuse. So one of the things, is that we've noticed is that the key to the Ramchal, and we've pointed this out on many occasions before, is the key to knowing and differentiating is using your mind, is using reason, logic, and honest thought, right? Real knowledge. I mean, to come up with these decisions takes knowledge. What risks are real, what risks are not, and also self-awareness, right? What are my motivations? Is my motivation laziness, or is my motivation a reasonable, rational fear, right? So the bottom line is that the intellect is driving this. The intellect drives us to know and understand how we're supposed to behave. So all of these things, right? Right? Daily experience that we all get every day will testify, right, that I'm right about what I'm saying. It is, everybody knows, right? Because everybody sees this is so widespread and so common among people to act this way. We see it, and we see it in our interactions with people all day, every day, right? And whether it's at work, in our family, in the social groups, or whatever, we constantly see people acting this way. Asher zedarkum kesalamo. This is their foolish way of going through life, right? How many times have we talked to people and said, come, let's do X, Y, Z, and they make up reasons not to, and we know deep down that they're really just not interested. They're really just being lazy. They're just making up excuses for it. So you don't need to be a genius. Umaskil al davar, but if you really think about this and you really pay attention, yimsa emes lamito, you'll find that what I'm saying is absolutely the truth. Vidas lenavon nakal, right? And true knowledge to a person who understands comes easily. So using your seichel, using your head is the bottom line. People know, right? Everybody knows who's real, who's not, right? Who's really interested in doing something, and who's really interested in finding excuses. And hopefully that extends to ourselves as well. Ukvar nisbar inin hazrizos beor. So I've now have explained the issue, the matter of or the trait of zirizut, of zeal, right? A clearly, in a way, that I think that it's enough, the arat halev, to arouse your heart. And an intelligent person will wisen himself up, become more wise. Yosef lekach, and will increase his knowledge and his understanding. So the bottom line is that I think I've told you enough about this trait. And if you're wise, you'll take it to heart and you'll look into it. There's a little paragraph left for this chapter, and then I'll open the floor for comments. Right, and you could see right, lios bahadraga achazir. It makes sense that zerizut, zeal, should come in the steps after the step of zihirut, of care and caution. Ki al harov, because in general, lo adam zarez im lo yezar betfila. A person cannot have zeal to do the right thing until he is zahir, until he is careful, right? First be careful not to stay away from the bad stuff, and then you'll develop a zeal for the good stuff. If you don't take care and concern to be careful b'masav in what you do, to think about what is your job and what are the rules and associated rules regarding that job. That is the trait of zirus, of carefulness and concern. As I wrote, it would be difficult for a person then to be filled with the love and the desire to do the right thing. So first you need to be careful to stay away from all the bad paths. Identify what the right path is. That's zihirut. That's carefulness. And once you identify the right path, then you can fill yourself up with that desire to do the right thing, right? And to be filled with a zeal or a desire to act before his creator. If you're still stuck in all of fulfilling your own personal desires, and you're running in your normal habits, which takes you far away from doing the right job that you're supposed to be doing. Right, because you're being stuck in that, so you're never going to have the zeal to do the right thing. However, once you've opened your eyes, to be careful about what you're doing, to be concerned, to be that you're doing the right thing, that you're living the right way, and you thought, I can go on the right path, I can go on the wrong path. Then, like we mentioned, then it becomes much easier to stay away from the bad path, be cake, and to desire to the good path, to be as dorsbo and have zeal for it. Is that pasha? The bottom line is that first you have to have zirut, you have to understand what's the right way to go. And once you understand that and you feel that and you know that, you'll automatically be full of a desire to do the right thing and hopefully have that kind of zeal to go on the right path in the right way. So that concludes the midah, the trait of zirizut, of alacrity or zeal, or I forget. I had other translations before, but whatever. Anyway, any comments, questions, observations? No.
I thought it was a little bit depressing to say that we're put here to toil. Like the translation in my version was to exert and to toil or something. It was like really harsh. It says it was not placed in this world for tranquility, but rather for toil and exertion. And while I do tend to agree with that leaning and that disposition in a sense, it's also a little bit harsh because I also believe that part of life is to enjoy and to try to achieve a sense of tranquility that oftentimes you don't get to attain, I guess, until you've done the work first. So maybe it's more of a progression. But I do think that ultimately we don't want to be toiling and exerting all of the time. We want to earn a level of tranquility and peace.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is totally right and legitimate. The only thing is that right now in this chapter he's talking about zeal, right? He's talking about the zeal to do and accomplish and achieve, right? So of course there's a place for relaxation in life, and he did state, a few places in passing things like, it's okay, take what you have, take your skills, take your enjoyment, but then move forward. But I think the focus of this chapter is not on that. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's not that he's against it, right? Yeah. Of course, he understands there's a time and a place to sit and enjoy the meal, right? Or enjoy your friends, or enjoy whatever relaxation in your life, right? But right now he's referring to the enthusiasm we should have for the job that we have to do, and there's certainly, we find, and we've all encountered people, and we've all been in this place ourselves where we don't want to do the work and we get all upset. I just want to stay home. I just want to, I want it to be easy, but it's not. The world, it's just not easy. And if you want it to be, you could want it to be easy, but it's not easy. Being successful in life. I mean, maybe there are a few people that win the lottery, but for most of us, to make it work, we have to work. But so it's about what he's talking about now. You know what I mean? I don't think he meant that we should never, ever, ever relax. It's just that this isn't a chapter on relaxation.
This isn't the one.
Right. I don't think there is a chapter on relaxation in this book.
I was struck by when he said that we were all day laborers. I don't know. I like that because it felt very like this life is short.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna make your mark, you gotta get out of bed. You're not gonna make it if you don't. And also too, getting stuck in a rut where you're like, oh, going to the gym, I can't, I got too much on my plate, or you stop and then you go back and you're like, oh my gosh, this is such a stress reliever. Like if I had this during this time period, I would have been better.
Right.
But you forget the good.
There's so many times. I mean, I have these conversations with my patients all the time. You know, and you tell them, just go out, take a walk every day. Pay attention to what you're eating. Don't eat all this crap all the time. Whatever. Just like and make a little effort. I mean, it's I speak to myself too. I mean, we all have these problems. I'm not saying that, but when you have a job to counsel people, which is part of my job, and then the few times that they say, you know what, doc, I did it and it was great and I feel good about it, and that's most of the time people don't. They just keep doing the same old thing. But those few people that take that extra step, they accomplish and achieve incredible things,
I think it is a good reminder of, it's a rude awakening, but it's also a reminder to all of us about the importance and kind of the results that you can get from discipline, right? Mm-hmm. So I remember many years ago, I don't know, I was having a meeting with some people and I was like, I was doing something right at work and they were using my work as like a role model for others. And I remember they asked me like, well, what's the secret to like I think I was in a sales role and I had like just had a ton of activities. Like I called all these people, I did this stuff that like nobody wants to do. And they're like, what's your secret? How do you do it? And it wasn't, my secret was not, I love calling people. I love cold calling and I, enjoy sending 1,000. It wasn't that. It was literally, I just do it. Like I just had to do it. This was my job. I had to do it. You told me I had to reach out to so many people. And so I just swallowed that pill and I did it. And I think that's, and I mean, who knows if I make the sales or not the sales, but the point of that activity was just the activity. Like you have to do that activity. Yeah. And I like that this chapter kind of brings that to light in any context of your life. It's like sometimes you just have to do things, even if you don't want to, you don't feel like it, your emotions aren't there, but you know that you have to do it. So just do it.
Yeah, and then you probably feel better once you do it.
Yeah. And you feel like you achieved something, accomplished something, and you receive recognition for it. So it makes you feel good. It's nice when you're sitting in a meeting and everyone, gives you a pat on the back and says, you did a good job. It's normal for people to and I love the word you said, discipline. I thought that's an excellent word, which I didn't use, but I think that really sums up the whole chapter is discipline. But when you have discipline, it also, once you accept that it's your job, then you can do it with zeal, right? Yeah. Right. If you make up a million excuses why you don't want to do it, or you don't want to make the calls, because we all know that 9 out of 10 of the call. I was never a salesperson, but I do know that 9 out of 10 are probably 99 out of 100, right? Probably hang up on you or curse you or yell at you or pretty pissed off that you called. But you still got to do it. That's your job, right? Anyway, the next midah which we're going to study is called nikiyut. What do you guys have translated there? I have blamelessness, which I really don't like.
The factors which diminish zeal are those which increase laziness.
But the next chapter 10, what's the title on chapter 10?
10? The trait of cleanliness.
Cleanliness. That's also a very bad translation. What do you guys have? Any other ones? I mean, literally.
I also have the virtue of cleanliness.
Cleanliness. Okay. Any others? So I think that nikiyut, which we'll see, and you guys will agree or disagree with me next time, because we're not going to have time to do it this time. But it's perfection, right? Doing things right. If someone can think of a better term for that, nikiyut is really about. So we talked about zihirut, which means staying away from the things we should be staying away from, focusing on what's right. Zihirut is now that you know what's right and you're staying away from what's wrong. How do you do it with enthusiasm, with zeal, with doing it the right way? I'm sorry, doing the right thing with enthusiasm. And nikiyut is doing it but not just doing the right thing, but doing the right thing right, doing it perfectly, doing it how it's supposed to be done.
That's a big difference from using the word cleanliness. So
yes, cleanliness is a terrible, terrible translation. I mean, it literally the right translation. The word nikiyut means cleanliness, but the way the Ramchal understands nikiyut has nothing to do with cleanliness. It has to do with, cleanliness only in the sense that you can wash the laundry, and just hope it gets cleaned, or you can wash the laundry and look for every spot and treat each spot and scrub it out and make sure that it's 100%. So in that sense, it's kind of like cleanliness, and we all know there's two different ways to do the laundry, right? But it's not talking about. Yeah, so we'll figure out better translations. If someone else can come, the one that I have is blamelessness, which I think is terrible.
These are also different from each other. That's what like other translations have been much closer. So why is that? That
I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe I should write my own translation. Yosef, go ahead. You had something? I see your hand up.
Here, and there's and that he won't, the father or husband will be naki and not be responsible for the wife's oaths. So nakiyut is way more than cleanliness or blemishlessness, but just
is it to be cleansed of then?
I think perfection might be an okay translation, but again, I'm just trying to put it out there so that to whet people's curiosity for next time. But within the midah of nikiyut, you guys are going to see some things that'll really, really speak to us, because it really tells us a lot about to do something right, not just to do it, but to do it right. Not just to say, oh, I don't do X, Y, Z, but I really don't do X, Y. Like I don't speak lashon hara. So I don't stand up in shul and scream, "You're a jerk and you're an idiot and you did this, you did." No, yeah. So most of us don't do that, but almost all of us say all kinds of things in all kinds of contexts, which they're not exactly like one of his examples. I know this is a spoiler, but I'll do it anyway. It's like stealing. He goes through a lot about stealing. Very few of us actually go and rob a bank, right? Maybe one of us might have, but most of us don't go to our friend's house and snatch their jewelry and leave. Most of us don't do that, but we do all kinds of things that affect other people's livelihoods, right? Which are not, maybe not actually stealing, but they're not exactly the right way to go about it, and that's what nikiyut is about. Nikiyut is, we can all go through life and say, oh, I'm not a thief, but some of my business practices might not be 100%, and those kinds of things. That's what nikiyut is about, and that's what we're going to study next. That's the next step. Now that you have zeal to do the right thing, well, let's really do the right thing in the right way, So, and
you just reminded me that's the 13th attribute of Hashem, v'nakeh lo yinakeh. That we're going to say it 1,000,000 times in the next 10 days.
Yeah, now we'll remember for the high holidays. That God is about, and we're supposed to resemble his traits. And God is naki; He's perfect. Everything is done exactly right, and that's how we need to strive to be as well. So I will make one other point before we finish, and that is that even though this is presented as a progression, right? All of these things are relevant to all of us. I mean, I'm sure none of us, or maybe some of us have perfected the first one, zehirut, yet, right? Right? And none of us probably have perfected zirizut, zeal. But that doesn't mean we're not allowed to go on to learning nikiyut. We can still learn a lot from each one of these stages. It's not like you have to go, in this progression, and until you master that, you can't move on to the next one, because there's lessons to be learned on each level. And and we'll see that next time. So I'm going to take a break now for all the chagim. So the next 4 weeks we won't have a class. What was the date of the next one? Was it October? I forgot. We said October something like
Should
20
be towards
something.
the end.
I think it'll be like, is it the 21st or that's still?
October 21st.
Yeah, October 21st will be then the next class. And hopefully we'll get this beautiful room again. This is a really nice room. So, yeah. All right. Anyway, thank you very much for participating. People that are here, people that reserved the rooms, that brought the food, and those that are here on Zoom, wherever you are, hopefully you'll have a beautiful Chag. We'll have a K'liva Chazima Tova, and hopefully have a year of better than this past year for us personally and as a Jewish people and as a world. So,
Amen.
all right.
Shana Tova.
Amen.
Oh, Shana Tova. So weird. It's gonna be next. 1 week from today, right? Yeah.